warm welcome to Armagh Robinson Library. We're very glad to have you with us today. And for us, all of these events and videos that we're holding are very much coming up to our 250th anniversary of the library. So it's great to have you with us, joining us for this particular project and this particular video. You will hear two women speaking later on in the whole session, but I'm doing the introduction because I want you to know we very much promote here in Armagh Robinson Library both the written word and the spoken word. And I believe that this particular video on the theme of poetry will make that lovely blend between both the spoken and the written words. And today we are having one of my colleagues involved in this and also one of our great supporters of the library. Through the life of the library, we have had many writers, authors, poets, musicians come along to us, and today we have highlighted the whole subject of poetry. So you will hear shortly the work of Maria McManus, both as a reader and as an author of poetry. So I hand you over now to Maria.
Robert Frost's poem, After Apple Picking, is a deliberate choice on my behalf to resonate with Armagh as Ireland's orchard county, and for how many people in Armagh must have that shared experience of bringing in the apple harvest and the hard physical graft of undertaking that work. So I'm really hoping that this is also a familiar and welcome poem. After Apple Picking by Robert Frost. My long two-pointed ladder's sticking through a tree towards heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough. But I'm done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night, the scent of apples. I'm drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight I got from looking through a pane of glass I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted and I let it fall and break. But I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the boughs bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. For I have had too much of apple picking. I'm overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. There were 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went sure to the cider apple heap as if of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck would say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe it coming on, or just some human sleep. He's so exhausted after that harvesting, he doesn't know whether he's going to hibernate for the winter or not. But I love that poem, and I love it because it also reminds me of Armagh, and it reminds me of the beautiful emblem of generosity that there is in the trees on the way into the city and how they have their own apples there along the roadsides on the very edge of the city, certainly on the Belfast side, where it seems to me that just anyone can help themselves to an apple on the way in. Seamus Heaney's Postscript is one of my favourite poems of all time, and I think quite possibly one of the entire nation's favourite poems of all time. And in it, he is driving along the flaggy shore, the west coast of Ireland in Clare, but he's talking a great deal also about watching swans coming into land. And I think there are tremendous resonances with Lochbeg in County Antrim, where he grew up, where he must have watched those phenomenal migrations of the whipper swans coming in each autumn. But it's I think a really beautiful poem from his collection, The Spirit Level. Postscript. And sometime make the time to drive out west into County Clare along the flaggy shore. In September or October, when the wind and the light are working off each other, so that the ocean on one side is wild with foam and glitter, and inland among stones the surface of a slate grey lake is lit by the earthed lightning of a flock of swans. Their feathers ruffed and ruffling white on white, their fully grown, headstrong-looking heads tucked or cresting or busy underwater. Useless to think you'll park and capture it more thoroughly. You are neither here nor there, a hurry through which known and strange things pass, as big, soft buffetings come at the car sideways and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. Beautiful words from Seamus Heaney there, and I love that evocation of the swans. Not only can we travel in our imagination to Clare, but in some way we are also alluding, I think, and joining him in the mythology of the children of Lear and those great stories of swans in Irish mythology. Beautiful poem. And the heart-stopping final line, and catch the heart off guard and blow it open. I want to read for you this poem by the Welsh poet R.S. Thomas called A Blackbird Singing. And I particularly like this poem because it resonates with the many Irish poets actually who have written a great deal about blackbirds singing. But I like this poem also because of his specific reference to orchards, and I know that that's very much a part of the deep DNA, if you like, of life in Armagh and the lived experience of people in Armagh. And I suppose, like Archbishop Richard Robinson, who is so important to Armagh, R.S. Thomas was also a man of the cloth. He was a clergyman. A Blackbird Singing. It seems wrong that out of this bird, black, bold, a suggestion of dark places about it, there yet should come such rich music as though the notes o'er were changed to a rare metal at one touch of that bright bill. You have heard it often, alone at your desk in a green April, your mind drawn away from its work by sweet disturbance of the mild evening outside your room. A slow singer, but loading each phrase with history's overtones, love, joy and grief learned by his dark tribe in other orchards and passed on instinctively as they are now, but fresh always with new tears. So it's slightly melancholic, but also really evocative of a solitary moment. And I love the economy of his language. So that was A Blackbird Singing by R.S. Thomas. This poem by Louis MacNeice is called Snow. And what I love about it is that it's incredibly evocative of the imaginative space that can open for any of us when we are present to being still and quiet. And the poem itself, unsurprisingly enough, is set in the winter time, but I think the invitation in the poem is there for us to see the possibility to just engage with the world in a very vivid way when we have the capacity to be still and really notice what it is that's happening around us. Snow by Louis MacNeice. The room was suddenly rich and the great bay window was spawning snow and pink roses against it, soundlessly collateral and incompatible. World is suddener than we fancy it. World is crazier and more of it than we think, incorrigibly plural. I peel and portion a tangerine and spit the pips and feel the drunkenness of things being various. And the fire flames with a bubbling sound for world is more spiteful and gay than one supposes. On the tongue, on the eyes, on the ears, in the palm of one's hands, there is more than glass between the snow and the huge roses. The beautiful poem Snow by Louis MacNeice. These two little poems of my own I'm going to read for you now, Child of Mine and Time, are part of a much bigger sequence that was written in response to the observatory, and are picking up on those ideas of our relationship to the moon and the moon landings. In the first one, I'm comparing that to those amazing pictures of astronauts landing on the moon for the first time, to that experience I had not only of watching that when I was a child myself, but in later years, as a younger woman and pregnant for the first time, seeing the scan pictures of my baby, where they were quite moon-like and quite evocative of that experience of watching those astronauts. And then the final poem is called Time, and it's really picking up on those ideas of playing on the beach with a small child and being really conscious of how time passes by making a sundial in the sand. Child of Mine. My own sweet little Artemis, my infant cosmonaut, When I saw you for the first time, you were rising out of the blue, a heartbeat across the carmine line of my womb. There you were, feisty and daring, tethered in your other universe, a frontier beyond. The images beamed back, grainy, lunar, spectral, like a vision on a screen I'd seen before, all those decades earlier. Time. The days are long gone since we made sundials on the beach with stones, shells, a stick, the obliging sun. And here we are, orbiting, still navigating space and time. I'm going to read for you a poem called Lady Acheson Weary of the Dean by Jonathan Swift. And this poem was recommended by the staff in the library. It seems that Dean Swift appears not to have been an ideal house guest. He visited Lady Acheson and her husband, Sir Arthur, in Market Hill several times between 1728 and 1730, staying on the estate which is now Gosford Park. And he wrote poems which are known as the Market Hill poems, but I'll read this poem for you because it clearly demonstrates Lady Acheson's annoyance with him for outstaying his welcome. But also, I think he was really quite mischievous because he knew he was outstaying his welcome. He understood the irritation, but he clearly did it anyway. Lady Acheson's Weary of the Dean by Jonathan Swift. The Dean would visit Market Hill. Our invitation was but slight. I said, why let him if he will, and so I bid Sir Arthur write. His manners would not let him wait, lest he should think ourselves neglected. And so we saw him at our gate 3 days before he was expected. After a week, a month, a quarter, and day succeeding after day, says not a word of his departure, though not a soul would have him stay. I've said enough to make him blush, methinks, or else the devil's in it, but he cares not for it a rush, nor for my life will take the hint. But you, my life, must let him know in civil language, if he stays, how deep and foul the roads may grow, and that he may command the chaise. Or you may say, my wife intends, though I should be exceeding proud, this winter to invite some friends, and sir, I know how you hate a crowd. Or, Mr. Dean, I should with joy beg you would here continue still, but we must go to Achnacle, or Mr. Moore will take it ill. The house accounts are daily rising so much his stay does swell the bills. My dearest life, it is surprising how much he eats, how much he swills. His brace of puppies, how they stuff, and they must have 3 meals a day, yet never think they get enough. His horses too eat all our hay. Oh, if I could, how I would maul his tallow face and wainscot paws, his beetle brows and eyes of wall, and make him soon give up the cause. May I be every moment chid with skinny, honey, snip and lean. Oh, that I would once be rid of that insulting tyrant Dean. Wasn't he bold? Wasn't he mischievous? To experience himself as though having overstayed his welcome, but do it anyway, and then write such a poem about it in her voice. The voice of a lady much too polite to express such a thing explicitly. It's good fun.
Thank you, Maria. We're very fortunate to have the wonderful poet Maria McManus reading some lovely poems and some of her work as well. If you were to visit us, and when you will be able to visit us here in the library, you'll be able to see the wonderful books of poetry and collections of poetry that we have. And I would like to show you some of those now. The last poem that Maria read referred to Jonathan Swift and his time staying with the Achesons in Market Hill. And I have the book that this poem is in. What is quite funny about the poem is that Jonathan Swift obviously knows that he is not the best house guest, and he would have stayed in Market Hill for long periods of time, and while he was there he wrote many poems, and these are referred to as the Market Hill poems. In this book, where the Lady Acheson poem is written, it was published in 1735, so it's quite old, and it's within a book called The Gentleman's Magazine. So it has lots of articles as well as poetry. I'm going to open up the book for you now so we can have a look at the poem. Before I do that, I will put on my white gloves. So just as the library has many wonderful poems by Jonathan Swift, we're also very blessed by having lots of poems and collections of poems written by female writers, just as you would have heard the wonderful Maria McManus reading some of her work. I have this book written by Mary Goddard, who was a wonderful poet in the 18th century. And what's also interesting about this book is that her name is nowhere to be seen in the title of the book or shown that she was the author. So this shows us that many women in the 18th century would have not been able to show their names on their work, but we're now able to tell people who it was written by. Mary Goddard would have written poems about her life, her friends, as well as the art of poetry itself. And I would like to read from you the preface to this book of poetry. Preface. Love inspired me first to sing. Love taught me first to tune the string. Never from vain or venal views did I invoke the gentle muse. My verse, the child of ease and love, had its first being in the grove, where, by my partial swain admired, had all the praise I ever desired. Fame, its alluring toils, had spread in vain, and that neglecting could I think on gain. But when all the righteous hand of heaven to all my joys a blow had given, the infant objects of my care, doomed in their mother's woe to share, the labours of my head or hand, with strictest justice must demand. To ease their wants, I'll gladly bear the laugh of wits, the critic's sneer. The wife, the virtuous, will approve my lays, and not the author, but the mother praise. So this is the third and final book that I'd like to show you surrounding the topic of poetry in the Robinson Library. We've come full circle back to Jonathan Swift again, and you would have remembered from Maria reading the wonderful poem about Jonathan Swift's time staying with the Acheson family that he was very fond of giving advice and his opinions, whether or not he was necessarily asked for them. And in this book, there is a letter of advice to a young poet written by Jonathan Swift in the 18th century. And although we're not sure who the young poet was, we're definitely sure that he got lots of great advice from Jonathan Swift within this letter. And although sometimes Swift is known for giving interesting or curious advice, I have to say the advice in this letter is lovely and very touching for anyone who would be thinking of possibly writing poetry or indeed writing at all. And Swift is very much of the opinion that for those who think you need to be very educated or have lots of money to be a successful poet, his advice is that you don't need those things at all and that you just need to write from the heart. And I would like to read one of the specific pieces of advice that Swift gives to this young poet. I think flowers of wit ought to spring as those in a garden do, from their own root and stem, without any assistance. So in this, Swift is saying that you don't necessarily have to have lots of money or lots of education to be a well-rounded poet. And I think this is wonderful advice for all of us to take.
Well, this completes our subject of poetry, and I hope very much that you have enjoyed it. I want to thank Maria. We have already thanked her a little, but a very big thank you to Maria for taking the time to work with us on this particular project. I also want to thank my colleague Rachel Toner, who is our Visitor Engagement Officer. She is one of the people that normally would meet and greet visitors, whether coming as individuals or as group visits. And it's lovely to have this opportunity. We won't know how many people will watch this particular video. We hope that there will be many. And the other people I want to thank are the members of the Arts Council of Northern Ireland, because you've made it possible for us to go ahead and do this video. So to all of you who have been part of this particular project, and to all of you, the audience, thank you very much for making a great team. Thank you.